Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams. I am very excited to come to you today with another top 10 favorites list from the year. Yesterday, you will have hopefully seen my historical fiction top 10. And today we are going to be talking about middle grade books. I have read a ton of middle grade books in 2021, and I just wanted to share my top 10 with you today. So we're just going to jump right in. The first two that I have, one is a reread, and one I'm going to talk more in depth about tomorrow in my nonfiction video. And I don't have it here with me. But the first one, number 10, is Anne of Green Gables by Ella Montgomery. I'm putting this at number 10, even though as far as it being a favorite of mine, it's probably closer to the top. But it is a reread, and I've talked about it oodles of times on my channel, so I just wanted it to be included in my list. So this is my number 10. This takes place on Prince Edward Island. We follow Sweet Anne, who is an orphan, and she comes to live with a brother and sister, Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, and she is full of imagination and precociousness. Is that a word? She's very precocious. She gets into lots of scrapes, innocent and unintended scrapes, but she gets into a lot of fun scrapes. But it's about friendship and family and belonging, and it's beautiful, and I love it so much. And I love Matthew, and I love Marilla, and I love all the friends, and I love it so much. This is a favorite of all time. Number 9 is one that I will talk more in depth tomorrow because it is a graphic memoir. So it is nonfiction, and I'm including it with my list of all the nonfiction that I read in 2021. But it is When Stars Are Scattered by Victoria Jameson and Omar Mohammed. It's Omar's story of having to flee the Sudan, to a refugee camp in Kenya. And we just learn about this refugee tent city, and he and his brother have to survive there. His parents are not with them, and we learn about why that is in the story. We learn about the neighbors and who helped them out. We learn about life in this refugee camp, as well as about life beforehand and what brought them there. It was just an interesting look on education in the camp. It was an interesting look on the differences between how boys and girls were treated at the time. It was a beautiful story of these two brothers and the responsibility and love that Omar has for his brother. It just was it was a beautiful story and a beautiful way for kids to get a glimpse of life that might be different from their own. Oh, it was so fantastic. So I would highly recommend that. That is my number 9, but I'm putting it at number 9 because I will talk about it more tomorrow, and you'll see where it ranks amongst my other nonfiction tomorrow. Continuing on with my middle grade list, though, at number 8, I have Moon Over Manifest by Claire Vanderpool. I think this is the only actual Newbery winner that I put on the list of the ones that I read. I didn't love a lot of the Newberries that I read this year, but this one I really did love. We follow Abilene. Her father has kind of put her on this train to go to Manifest, Kansas, where she has some family or something where she used to live. I forget why, while he goes off to work and get money and try to support them. She goes to Manifest, Kansas, and feels really abandoned, feels very alone. She finds this cigar box of memories and starts to learn about these stories of the past of these two friends through this box of memories. She gets to know different people in the town. She kind of goes on her own little scavenger hunt search for the past and the truth, and there's some surprising twists along the way. I loved the emphasis on story and the way that Abilene learns to feel loved and worthy and a part of things instead of so isolated and alone. It was a very sweet story. I loved the audiobook of this. Very well done. So good. Number 7 kind of speaks to my love of survival stories this year. For some reason, books that talk about having to live and figure things out in nature have stood out to me, and that is not any different here with Echo Mountain by Lauren Wolk. This takes place during the Great Depression, and Ellie and her family kind of are forced by circumstance to leave their home. Both of her parents have lost their jobs, and they travel up into the untamed forest on Echo Mountain to carve out a life for themselves. They live up on the mountain. They have to learn a whole ton of new skills after living in the village. And then something happens one day and her father becomes greatly injured. Ellie feels determined to do what she can to help her father. So she travels up the mountain to find this old woman who is known as the Old Hag to find some kind of remedy for her dad. In the process, she meets a few other people. The Old Hag is not quite what she expected, and she is able to face this grief and guilt that she carries And I just loved this story so much. I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was so good. And I love this cover. And I'm very eager to read more from Lauren Wolk. I thought this was great. For my number 6 spot, I'm cheating. I'm putting 2 books. So I have here Finding Langston and Leaving Lyman. Finding Langston is the first one, and we meet Langston, who is named after Langston Hughes. He is a young boy whose family moves to a new city. He is greatly bullied, and he finds comfort in the poetry of Langston Hughes. It just was a very well-told story about this young boy and his love for this poetry that is a surprising comfort to him. In Leaving Lyman, we meet Lyman. We continue to know Lyman, who was the bully in Finding Langston. He's horrible to Langston. We find out a little bit of his backstory and what's going on in his life. And this one brought me to tears. It deals with his family issues, in particular with his father and his own unmet hopes and expectations for his family and why he treats others the way that he does. Oh my word. I was so excited to get to know Lyman more and know what was going on in his head and why he was treating others in such a mean way, because it just felt very realistic. Oh man, these felt so realistic. I thought Lisa Klein Ransom did a great job. And there is a third one called Being Clem, which I do own now, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure it would have been in this mix amongst my favorites because, yeah, I just loved these so much. Number 5 brings us in a totally different directions. Those last ones were a little bit more heartwarming and difficult situations. This one is a lot more fun and whimsical, and it's The Extremely Inconvenient Adventures of Bronte Middlestone by Jacqueline Moriarty. Very early in this book, Bronte receives a telegram telling her that her parents have been attacked and killed by pirates, and they leave her these detailed instructions to kind of send her on this wild goose chase where she gets to go visit each of her different aunts. Along the way, there's just all of these fun escapades with different creatures. It's a very fantastical world. It's cute and fun and quirky, and I just absolutely loved it. I loved it so much, and I believe that there is a sequel to this out now, maybe even 2 more in this series. So I'm very eager to read more about Bronte Middlestone and see what she gets up to. This one kind of snuck in and captured my heart while I was reading it, but it was also just such a delight to read. It was just so much fun. I started a series in 2021 that I'm in the middle of still, and I fell head over heels in love with this series, and that is the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. Number 3 and number 4, I couldn't find number 3 at the moment. It's buried in the corner over there. But number 3 and number 4 have been my favorites so far, but I was invested in the series right from the get-go. At the very beginning, we meet Sophie, who is a young girl who really struggles to fit in. She finds that she can hear the thoughts of other people. She just doesn't fit in at school and doesn't have any friends. And she finds out very early on that is probably because she's an elf. And so she kind of goes to live in the elf world and has all of these adventures following that moment. This is an incredibly fast-paced series by Shannon Messenger. I forgot to say that. Right from the beginning, we are dropped right into the action and you take off running. She does a fabulous job with plot and keeping you turning those pages. They are chunkers, but I find I can read them pretty quickly because I just need to know what is going to happen. I also think Shannon Messenger is really good at developing characters. So we have Sophie, but we also have this crew of other kids and adults actually who kind of surround her in all of these events and things that she gets up to. And we get to know a lot about these other characters as well and get to care about them and find out their backstories and their family life. And they feel like really well-drawn characters. I don't feel like there are any throwaway characters. Everybody has a purpose. We get to know so many stories and get to know so many of these characters. She really does a great job with that as well. So I am just really loving this series. I'm excited to read book 5. In a few days, I'm going to start it. So yay for the Keeper of the Lost Cities and making some great progress on a middle grade series. Number 3 is another book that I don't have. And I think I must have borrowed it from the library. I thought I did own it. It's possible that I do. Once I get this room rearranged, I'll figure out if I own it or not. But it's A Wish in the Dark by Christina Soontorvand. This one received a Newbery Honor in 2021. The setting is very inspired by Thailand, but it is a bit of a fantasy. And also it has a lot of ties into Les Miserables, which was really fun because I read this one first. I think I read it in March. And then later in the year, I read Les Miserables. So it was really fun to kind of see again or remember back to some of the similarities. It's not an exact Les Mis retelling, but it had a lot of the same sort of storylines and themes that are in Les Mis. So in this one, we follow a young boy who he's born in prison, is treated as if he's a prisoner as he gets older, escapes one day, and goes to live with some monks. And there's this oppressive political party or characters who are in control of this world, and they are like taking away all of the light. And this young boy becomes involved with the resistance and helping to bring light back to the world. Again, it was a long time ago since I've read this, but I just remember loving it so much, and it deserves its place on this list. I actually think I switched it. This should have been number 4, and The Keeper of the Lost Cities should have been number 3, but whatever. It's okay. If you ask me tomorrow, all of these would probably switch around anyways. But yes, I really did love A Wish in the Dark by Christina Soontorban. Number 2 is another book that I read during middle grade March, and it is Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. This is the other Newbery winner. I did read another Newbery book, and this one was fantastic. I love this family. This is actually part of a series, The Logans, and I believe there are 6 or 7 in the series, and this is book 4, but you could totally read this one. Well, as far as I know, I haven't read any of the other ones, but I could read this as a standalone, and I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. This is about a Black family who lives in the South, and all of these siblings go to school, and the mother is a teacher, and it's about this family and how they are, the adults are raising up their kids to be strong and independent and kind in the midst of civil rights movement and in the midst of being treated so horribly by so many people, and how to protect yourself and be careful in certain situations without giving up who you really are. And that is such a fine line that I can't even imagine having to walk. And this family does their best to teach their children how to walk that line. And it's sad that they had to do that anyways, but it was a beautiful story of this family. There was some moments in here that were a little bit hilarious. There's one scene involving a school bus in particular that stands out in my mind, but also very difficult to read at times as well. And how I just get so angry with how humans treated other humans in different times in history. And in the South in particular, I know was just not great. And I thought that this book was beautiful. I was crying. I was hugging it. I just loved it so much. So good. So good. And then my number 1 favorite middle grade of 2021 was a book written in verse, Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. I actually listened to this, but my favorite way to read books in verse is to read and listen, because I feel like you get the full experience when you do that. This was a beautifully written story. This starts out in Syria with Judah and her family, and she has a great love for her homeland and for her village and her home. But because of the political situation there, her and her mom decide to emigrate to the United States. Her father and brother stay in Syria. And when she comes to the U.S., it just talks about how she's treated, how she feels. It talks about her ESL class and the little mini found family that happens in their ESL class, English as a second language. I loved Judah. I loved her love for her home in the midst of all that was going on, and how horrible it must have been to have to leave. I just thought that this was a beautiful book. I was very connected to the story. I loved the poetic verse. Like, I loved that it was written in free verse, but also because I listened to it, it didn't feel intimidating, as sometimes I think of poetry as intimidating, to be honest, but it didn't feel intimidating. It just was a beautiful way to draw pictures and show me how Judah saw the world and how she learned to find a way to belong and make America her home now, in the midst of still loving her homeland and her village. I just thought it was so beautifully done and loved it. That's why it's number 1 on my list. Middle grades for the year. So beautiful, so good. So many fantastic middle grade books. Oof. So here are all but 2 that I didn't have or couldn't find of my top 10. Middle grade books of the year. Oh, so many good ones. I am such a fan of middle grade. I know not all of you are middle grade readers, and that is okay. My hope is that after hearing about these books, whether you read middle grade or not, you're kind of drawn to one or two or four or all of them and interested in giving it a try, even if middle grade is not maybe your go-to, or maybe if you don't read that much middle grade, you're still willing to give one of these a try. I would love for you to tell me that. Let's talk about these books or anything else that you want to talk about down in the comments below. You guys know I love talking with you down there. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate this. I have 2 more favorites videos coming. Tomorrow will be nonfiction. And then on the last day of favorites, I will be talking about some mysteries and thrillers that I read in the year, which weren't many, but I do have a list of 10. So we're going to make it work. All right, that's it for me today. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.